I'm Tom Trowbridge, co-founder of Fluence. Fluence is a cloudless compute platform. And what does that mean? It means decentralized compute. And importantly, what cloudless, when we talk about cloudless, we want it to be resilient and also verifiable. And importantly, that is not satisfied with just a marketplace. So a compute marketplace, you could basically open up your browser and choose between Google and Amazon. That doesn't make it a network, that doesn't make it a platform, that doesn't make it resilient. So in order to have a proper, what we call cloudless platform or a compute network, it has to be resilient and it has to be verifiable. So let's get into it a little bit. And it's also obviously decentralized and low cost. And I can talk about exactly how we're going to get to that low cost. But global and self-healing from downtime, that's what you want in a network. What I'm talking about here also is initially a CPU network. And everyone has been talking about GPUs. GPUs are super important. AI is certainly going to dominate the GPU market, is going to grow. But there are billions of CPUs. Everything you do uses CPU except for AI model training. Right? So the world runs on CPUs, and you hear almost none of it in these rooms. But CPUs are what dominate every single thing we do, and will for a very long time. So why is cloudless? Decentralized, resilient. It's the main 2 points here. We're about 80% cheaper than centralized alternatives, and I can explain how we get there. And also, you can choose green energy. So we have data centers online that are purely renewable, and so you can actually choose to have the type of energy you would like to power your compute. Question, why does it matter? Why do we care? And we care because right now, the top 3 cloud companies dominate. All compute happens more or less with those 3 companies. And people do it because they're easy to use initially, you get sucked into them, but then they're very hard to leave, and they don't encourage innovation. And the secret of our Web3 world is most of it runs on the cloud. Infura runs on the cloud. All those companies run in the centralized cloud. We like to think we're a decentralized world. Surprise, we're not. Even a lot of blockchain nodes are run and the computation happens in the cloud. That can all be cut off momentarily by a perceived term of service violation, right? So if we actually want to be decentralized, all that CPU work has to move off the cloud, has to. And Fluence is going to help us do that. And so why does cloudless win? I think that's pretty clear, but there's no fees, it's transparent and costless. And when you can move from provider to provider without friction, you necessarily eliminate the pricing power of the providers, which takes your cost all the way down to basically just above the marginal cost, just above the electric cost. And when you have an open platform, you encourage innovation. And that allows new things to be built that we haven't yet seen. And that's why we think cloudless is the next generation and probably the final iteration of the web and of compute. We started off in mainframes. We've moved to the cloud. Cloud was promised better service and cheaper products, which it was from in-house mainframes. And for those exact same reason, cloudless, whether it's Fluence or others, will be the next iteration. It'll be cheaper. You'll ultimately have better service as well and more choice. Now let's talk token economics. And I think this is pretty important. DePIN in general, and I'm not just referring to the cloud-oriented DePINs of storage and compute, but all the other DePINs that are mapping and location services and all these other DePIN projects we know well, have fiat costs. And they also can generate fiat revenue. This is very different because of the fiat links to the fiat outside world. That's not like the DePIN and the initial kind of first and second waves of crypto. And so that leads a need for actual revenue that's stable, that can actually support this hardware because of the cost base. The other point here is we're very close to seeing revenue traction coming in. We've heard from Helium just now. They're generating revenue. XNet is a number of crypto projects, of DePIN projects are generating revenue. That's going to drive investor attention. And guess what? Those investors are going to want to understand the token economics and have far less patience for kind of less specific ideas and links to how the revenue actually works. And so if we disaggregate token economics. In general, you've got about 5 pieces to it, 2 of issuance and 3 of demand or use. And I think everyone's familiar with this, but I think it helps when you pull them apart and you can start to actually understand the building blocks of what makes the token economics work. And a key point is the reward, which we're very familiar with. That's kind of critical to almost every protocol. And then also some level of staking and burn. That links revenue and scale and success to scarcity in the token. And if you don't have that, your token economics are probably not going to be great. And that means some other project will do something similar to you and will have better tokenomics and probably win. So here are the crypto reward design challenges. People are aware that if you have a low token price, you can't support your infrastructure. People can't pay the electricity bills, they can't support a team, and things go under. We've seen this in a couple crypto infrastructure projects already, where in market crashes, people go offline, service falls, service is impaired. So everyone's worried about a low token price. That is something to be worried about. You also have to be careful of a high token price, because particularly in DePIN, if you have a high token price from mining, you may not care about doing the hard work of actually serving customers and bringing customers on. That's much more complicated than just doing the mining or the proof of coverage or the proof of capacity or the proof of storage or the proof of compute. Whatever the proofs you're doing, that's kind of easy. You can run that on autopilot. Actually having customers is a pain in the neck. And if you're making too much from just the proofs, you may not care about the customers. So high token price can be equally damaging to your long-term ability to be viable and have customers. So the other point here is stake. And in the DePIN world of storage and compute, most projects, you have to be a provider in order to stake. We think, Fluence, you need to open that up and allow delegated stake for anybody to be able to stake to providers. That allows anyone to basically secure the network. It reduces the cost for providers who don't also have to buy the stake. They can just borrow it effectively from the community. And it rewards the investor in the communities for holding tokens. So delegated stake, I think, clearly is the best path forward, as opposed to requiring the actual providers to stake themselves. And I think you will see that kind of be the final kind of iteration of this. And we can talk about how you keep the return viable. And so this is an example of how things work on Fluence, and I'll show you the iteration of this. But our stake is per CPU. It's in dollars, but denominated in FLT. And so that has very compelling characteristics once you start to think through it. 12,000 per CPU, that generates about $600 a month or 7,200 per year in reward, also paid in Fluence tokens. Now those release over time, they adjust every day based on where the token is, so you're never gonna get exactly that amount, but that's the concept. And so what this does, if you're a provider, you're pretty clear that you're gonna get a certain amount because of this calibration to fiat. And if you are a staker, you stake a certain amount. If the price goes up, you still have those tokens, and you can either unstake them at the end of the contract or add another CPU. Price goes down, it comes to restake, guess what? You have to either buy more tokens to restake or you leave the network. And we think this leads to a really volatility mitigating effect on the network. It also leads to, let's see here. Well, we think this is where you end up here is how you will end up staking. And so what that leads to is potentially, if you can know how much CPUs will be going to the network, you can estimate the demand for stake. So if we get to one data center size, this is like a medium-sized data center of 25,000 CPUs, $300 million of FLT is required to be staked, right? That's bigger than our token market cap right now. But that's what would be required to do that. And that doesn't happen in one day, right? That happens over time. But when you can see that level of demand and that level of potential, you start to understand the power of the staking as opposed to just 10% of the token supply or X amount of circulating supply. No, the way this should work and will work is by doing it on a dollar basis. And that's why we think this is basically the final iteration, the final evolution of token economics, where it starts off with the reward in token and pay in tokens. We're all familiar with that, right? That's rather arbitrary. It's clearly successful with Bitcoin. Bitcoin, I think, is a unique animal, so to speak. I don't think we'll see many others like it succeed at that scale. Then the next iteration, you add token stake to that. That's great. Filecoin does that as an example, and that's has done fine. But then you go a little bit further and you accept fiat, so you don't just have a token payments, but you actually accept fiat into the network. That changes the dynamic, which is good. And maybe you add buy and burn, very important. That has scarcity. And then the final iteration is the reward is a fiat reward, but paid in tokens. You accept fiat, you buy and burn the token, and you also have fiat-based stake. And if you're at that final iteration, you have very compelling demand for your token as your network scales. Your network doesn't scale, you don't have revenue, it's not going to help you. But if you do, you have a very specific link to it, and that we think is going to differentiate successful projects from very successful projects. So where we think Cloudless is, it's an open alternative. Open alternatives generate value, lead to innovation. Ethereum is that way for banks. We think Fluence is that way for the cloud. And so this is a huge market. We won't be alone in it, that's for sure. Others are coming, and we appreciate that. We think this is an enormous market, and when you have an open ecosystem, then the products and services built for one will help others. And so we're excited for more people to join. A quick pitch here, since I'm pitching, podcast, DePINed, D-E-P-I-N-E-D. That's my DePIN podcast. Have about 25 episodes. A bunch of the people who spoke here have been on it, but not everybody. So I've got more people to get, but it comes out every week. So you'll recognize a bunch of these names. I think, Mark already spoke today, and I think David spoke today as well. So you'll recognize these names if you've been paying attention here. And then finally, another event, DePIN event, Friday. We have our DePIN Day, so come to that. I think we've got 2,000 RSVPs for that so far, so expecting it to be a solid turnout, and that you can scan that, so you can get the information for our DePIN Day on Friday. So thanks very much, appreciate it, and thanks for listening.